All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started. I'm Bob Wagner with Canna Advisors. I'll give you a little bit more of an introduction as we get into our show here. Today, we're going to talk about specifically the licensing process in Delaware and what it's going to take to get licensed and how they're going to go about the process. So without further ado, I'm going to start the presentation here. After we go through these slides, I will do some Q&A. So any questions you have, just save them and put them into the Q&A button when the time is right. I suppose you could start typing them in anytime you have, and I'll get to them at the end of the presentation. But here we go. Canna Advisors, Delaware Cannabis Licensing. First, a quick introduction to Canna Advisors. Canna Advisors is headquartered in Boulder, Colorado. That's where our founding partners opened their first medical marijuana dispensary back in 2009. As the need for help with licensing began to develop, they formed Canna Advisors in 2012. Over the last 12 years, we've worked in 39 U.S. states. Cumulatively, we have well over 100 years of cannabis industry experience. We stopped counting at 100, but probably closing in on 200 if you added up everybody on our staff and the years they've been in the cannabis industry. We also have satellite offices around the country. I'm based out of New York. We have another one in Virginia, so we have Delaware surrounded. Couple milestones. Starting way back in 2012, we worked with clients in Nevada, Connecticut, and Massachusetts in the early competitive medical days, won those licenses. And as you see on this slide, it continued on. Many of these little green circles represent, 15, 20, 25 license wins. In fact, Missouri in 2020, we won about 30% of the licenses issued in the state that year. And we continue to win licenses. We not only have worked with clients through the licensing, we help them get their operations up and running, and we also do mergers and acquisitions and have worked with clients as they've exited the industry. I'm Bob Wagner. I'm a little embarrassed to say I have 30 years of business experience with 20 plus of them at the executive level in both public and private companies. I'm into my 9th year with Canna Advisors, which 9 years in the cannabis industry takes its toll. Assisted hundreds of clients all across the country as they've secured licenses and got up and running successfully. And I look forward to working with many of you. So Delaware, let's start with the most recent developments and then work through the process. Delaware signed a law on July 22nd that allows the 13 medical cannabis dispensaries and their supporting companies to convert to adult use sales. This will allow adult use sales to begin on schedule in early 2025, and that is actually a very good thing. It was not cheap for these companies to convert. They're paying $200,000 to convert these over to adult use operators, which is a lot more than the $1,000 to $5,000 application fee that new entries will have to pay. And to put it in perspective, there are currently 27,000 registered medical cannabis patients in Delaware that are split among those 13 medical providers. So it's just over 2,000 patients per dispensary. And this was a move that was expected. And has no impact on the issuing of new licenses. It's just part of the process of converting over to adult use. To put this in perspective with what the new licenses will experience, we look at the adult use retail projections. Delaware has a population of 897,000 people. Impressively, it also pulls 9.8 million overnight visitors per year. So it's not just that population, it's all the visitors that become potential customers for this industry. Based on those visitors and population, it's estimated that Delaware will reach about $350 million in retail sales within a few years. And we say a few years because it takes time for all of these cultivators to get online, for all of these operators to get online, So it's not a day one issue, it's building the industry. If you add together the 30 new retail licenses with the 13 existing medical license dispensaries, there'll be 43 licensed cannabis dispensaries in Delaware. Now, this is subject to change over the years. If the OCM decides, or excuse me, OMC decides that they need more licenses to meet demand, they can certainly issue them. One thing I think we've discovered in the recent past is people in Delaware can change their minds. It might take some prompting, but it's plausible. So if you have 43 licensed retail dispensaries, that averages over 8 million in retail sales per dispensary annually. These should be pretty healthy businesses. Application timeline. Revised regulations were released on July 2nd. There was an early social equity verification window that closed on July 15th. If you did not verify a social equity, don't panic. There'll be another opportunity, and I'll get into that on a slide in a minute. The public comment period on those revised regulations ended yesterday, July 31st. The expected final version of the regulations will be published on September 1st, and they become official 10 days later, which would be September 11th. In the regulations, it says they are required to announce 10 days beforehand the opening of an application window with how many of each type of license will be available. Based on that, unless they announce the application window prior to the regulations becoming official, they may push back from that September 1st deadline that is still throughout the OMC's documentation. They still say September 1st. They could stick to it, but usually they let regulations become official before they announce the open application window. My advice would be prepared for September 1st. If it gets pushed back a couple of weeks, you got the 3 R's. You rest, you review, and you refine. Always better to be prepared than to be caught scrambling. Social equity. This is people ask all the time, why social equity? And the program is designed to create a more inclusive and equitable program. And it's designed to create fairness and level the playing field to give opportunity to those that were more impacted by cannabis prohibition. It's designed to repair communities that were more impacted and to create a more diverse industry. It's not just for corporations coming in from the outside, and that is why Delaware has implemented social equity the way they have. I'm going to go through social equity pretty quickly. I'm sure all of you are fairly aware of it, but just in case you're not, and this is something we post on our website, so people who aren't as educated on the social equity requirements may need this information. A social equity applicant can be an entity, and it must be at least 51% owned and controlled by one or more individuals who meet the social equity criteria. And that means it can be one person with 51% ownership and control, or it can be two people, one with 25%, one with 26%, however it breaks down. Criteria number 1 is that somebody has resided for at least 5 of the preceding 15 years in an area with high rates of arrest, conviction, and incarceration. You don't have to guess. They've posted a disproportionately impacted area map on the Office of Marijuana Commissioner's website. And you can actually zoom into this map right down to the streets. So you can see if you're in this green zone. If you are, you're highly likely to get verified as social equity. If you think you're right on the edge, you might want to get that verification before you move forward. In addition to where you've resided, criteria number 2 is a cannabis conviction prior to April 23rd, 2023, with the exception of delivery to a minor or high-tier quantity convictions. Criteria 3 is if you had a parent, a guardian, child, spouse, or dependent who was convicted. Something to note on this is that it does say specifically under Delaware law. Some states will have convictions that they'll just say cannabis convictions, and that opens it up to people with convictions in other states. This says under Delaware law, and we have seen other states do that. It is a way to give an advantage. So far, this has not been challenged by the Dormant Commerce Clause because it has nothing to do with where you reside, just where you were convicted. As far as getting verified, the state ran an early verification window that closed on July 15th. And originally they were saying you did have to be verified prior to submission. Now on their website, this is a quote right from the website, if you miss this opportunity, you may still apply for a social equity program license in the September window. Participating in the pre-screening process only provided an early opportunity to confirm your eligibility before the official application period opens. They do go on to say right now that you will not be required to pay your application fee until you're verified as social equity. So theoretically, you could get onto the portal when it opens, begin uploading documents, and wait for your verification and only submit and pay once you have your verification. So social equity. Now let's look at the types of licenses. Most states have just done social equity and open licensing. Delaware has added this micro business, which does make the lottery process a little bit more complex, but there's different opportunities for people. As we've just described, social equity is 51% ownership by people who meet one of those requirements. A micro business is designed to be a mom and pop type shop, a small business, and it really is designed to help people get in more of a cottage industry. There are only micro licenses in cultivation and manufacturing, nothing in retail. So to be qualified as a micro business, for cultivation, you have to be in a facility that cannot exceed 2,500 square feet of flowering canopy or 1 acre of outdoor growth. And you also cannot employ more than 10 employees. For a manufacturer, obviously you're not growing anything, so only the 10 employees would be the requirement. Interesting notice, the original rules required 5 of the last 10 years residency in Delaware to qualify as a micro business. That is now crossed out in the proposed rules. And it's likely because residency itself has been challenged in litigation state after state. The first time was a case in Maine where Maine required you to be a resident of Maine, and somebody took them to court under the Dormant Commerce Clause, which prevents states from passing laws or regulations that inhibit interstate trade. That case, the plaintiff lost, and the judge said because cannabis is federally illegal, those businesses are not protected by federal law. Shortly after that, a case was brought up in Oregon where the plaintiff made the same argument, residency was unfair, and they won their case. The judge there said federal law did cover cannabis businesses. And since then, there's been litigation across the country. The latest one was in your neighbor there, Maryland, where one of the social equity requirements was if you attended a college or university where 40% of the students qualified for Pell Grants, and it only listed the 6 in Maryland that qualified. So they were sued saying that required residency, and that is still tied up. But that is probably the reason you saw the residency disappear from the micro business. Then we have open licenses. And these are businesses that do not require you to meet social equity verification or to be the small micro business. Something that I'll show you in a second here, that doesn't mean a social equity applicant cannot win one of these open licenses. It just means you do not have to meet those requirements to apply for one of those licenses. And in fact, in the proposed regulations, it says the commissioner may roll social equity applications into the open application round without the requirement of any additional application fee. So they do intend to do that. So let's look at the cultivation licenses first. There will be up to 60. They say up to 60 because there's nothing that requires the state to give away every license. I would highly expect that they'll get enough applicants that they will give away all 60. The first tier 1 is the up to 2,500 square foot indoor or acre outdoor, which qualifies as a micro. There will be 20 of these 60s will be reserved specifically for micro size. Half of those will go to social equity applicants. So what they're likely to do is take everybody who applies as a social equity verified applicant for a tier 1, put them into a bin, draw 10 licenses out, 10 winners, and then add everybody else who's applying for a micro who doesn't qualify for social equity and draw 10 more. Then they'll move on to the larger licenses, and they're all in one pool, tier 2, 3, and 4. What they're likely to do is take everybody who's in tier 2, 3, and 4, draw 10 social equity winners, then add all of the non-verified social equity and draw 10 more. So being social equity qualified definitely improves your chances of securing one of these licenses. Manufacturing, there'll be up to 30 licenses. 10 of them will be micro, capped at 10 or fewer employees, and you can apply for that whether you're social equity or not. There's no difference. It says they're going to issue 10 of them. Then there'll be 20 that aren't capped in size. 10 of those will go to social equity applicants. 10 of them will go to open applicants. Retail, there'll be up to 30 licenses. The first 15 will be drawn out of the social equity pool. Everybody else will get added in, and they'll draw 15 more, issuing those 30 licenses. So the licenses that they're issuing as part of this lottery are called conditional licenses. They are not a license to go start your business and start selling or growing cannabis. It means that you have met the minimum qualifications and have been selected through the lottery to receive one of these licenses. That allows you 18 months to go secure a properly zoned property in a municipality that's willing to approve you operating there, complete any additional requirements. They may want to see standard operating procedures, security plans prior to giving you a license. And then they'll come and inspect your premises to make sure you meet all of the regulations, all of the security regulations, all the safety regulations. And once they approve your facility, you'll get an operating license to open your doors. Fees. An open license application fee is $5,000. A social equity application fee is $1,000. A micro license application fee is $3,000. Now, that likely means if you're social equity verified and applying for a micro cultivator, you'll have the $1,000 fee. As long as you're verified as social equity, even for a micro license, you get the $1,000 fee. Application requirements. This is now we get into the barrier of entry. While the state does want to utilize a lottery for the purpose of, well, the primary purpose of limiting litigation, they also want to ensure that the people who win these licenses have the ability and resources to get businesses up and running. It does no good to issue these licenses and have them sit there on a shelf. So they will require a comprehensive business plan with an annual budget and pro forma. They want to see your projections for what it's going to cost to get this business off the ground, what it's going to cost to operate, and that you're reasonable in your projections for revenue. And I think knowing that you have a reasonable understanding of the costs show that at least you're on your way to raising the capital required. As part of that business plan, they'll want to see the likelihood of success, sufficient experience, training, and expertise, on part of the applicant and the managing officers. So it doesn't have to be cannabis industry experience. If you have experience operating, running, owning a business, you'll want to talk about what you've done to be successful. It does transcend industries, and that will be able to be utilized as experience. They'll also want you to submit plans for safety, security, and the prevention of diversion. Now, most of the focus in a diversion plan is how are you going to keep employees from stealing inventory. That's where the majority of leakage comes through in the industry, and they'll want you to have a plan and processes in place to prevent that. Additional plans, you'll need an operating plan, including training and staffing, a social responsibility plan with diversity goals. They'll want to see a plan to provide a safe, healthy, beneficial working environment with fair wages. They'll also want to see where you plan to hire from within the city, state, or region. You'll also want to see any criminal, civil, or regulatory history encountered by the managers of the entity applying. That doesn't mean if you worked for a company that had a history of regulatory encounters that you'll be disqualified. Certainly, you could have been working for a company that had an issue and you resolved the issue, and your part was helping to resolve it. We see this in most states, and again, it doesn't mean you'd be disqualified. They just want to know that people who are applying for these have a track record of doing the right thing. They've also added a plan to comply with the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network under the Bank Security Act. This only applies to applicants that have operated cannabis businesses in another state. So it specifically says where the applicant has operated a business related to personal use or medical marijuana. So if you have not owned a cannabis business in another state, this wouldn't pertain to you at all. And it goes on to say an applicant who does not submit the information shall not be disqualified from consideration. One final thing, cultivation applicants only need to submit a quality assurance plan with written policies and procedures for quality control assurance. Obviously, that's a big concern of states, making sure that the product that's making it to consumers is safe and usable. Application rejection. Your goal here is to get into that lottery. From there, you can't control it, but you do want to make sure you qualify for that lottery. The commissioner may deny applications for multiple reasons. It certainly, if you submit an application that's just missing material, it's going to get rejected. If it contains material misstatements, omissions, untruths, it will get rejected. They will have a checklist to show that you've submitted everything and it meets their minimum qualifications for that type of license. Obviously, if you don't submit by the deadline, as stupid as that sounds, there have been lawsuits in states where people miss the deadline and still feel they should be reviewed. And then it is plausible, we've seen it in other states, where after the application goes in, they find that they're missing information and they'll request additional information and usually give you a time frame in which to submit it. And if you don't do that, they'll reject your application. Then we move into the lottery process. This is the part that gives most people stomach acid. It's one thing when you can control your own destiny. It's another thing when it's on a ping pong ball in a machine. But all applicants that meet the minimum qualifications will be put into the lottery to award the licenses. It will be done in a random, impartial manner at the discretion of the commissioner. They need to notify the winners of the lottery within 10 days. It is not uncommon for them to televise these drawings or at least stream these drawings. So we don't know yet how they'll do it, but we've seen states stream them so that you have the ability to watch it live. Submission restrictions. This is in the proposed revised regulations. An applicant may not apply for and may not be issued any license that would, or a financial interest that would end up in you owning more than one establishment of the same license type in a single county. An applicant is not prohibited from applying for and being issued more than one license in a single county, provided that each license is a different license type. So what this means is you can apply for a cultivation, a manufacturing, and a retail license and have shared ownership between those applications. The interesting thing is Delaware only has 3 counties, which is the fewest of any state in the country. This opens a question: does this pertain to this licensing round, or is this anticipating that there will be future licensing rounds? Because if they come out with their application form and it allows you to designate in which county you plan to operate on your application, you could potentially submit multiple applications. You could submit by rule cultivation, manufacturing, and retail in each of the 3 counties. And given that the application material would be fairly universal, since there's no property involved and you're not doing any floor plans or any property specific, realistically, your only extra expense would be the application submission. Now, they may come out and say, in this first round, you can only apply for one of each type, but in the future, you can own more. Still try, if anybody who's listening has been able to get an answer to that, let me know. I've been searching for it without success. But I would see right now that it's completely plausible for somebody to submit up to 9 submissions. The timeline. We touched on the application window. They're still saying September 1st. It is at least a 50-50 shot that will get pushed back at least 2 to 3 weeks. But who knows? They may pull it off. And then what Delaware's doing is very wise, where they're issuing their cultivation licenses first, with the goal of doing that starting November 1. Their manufacturing licenses next, starting December 1, and then holding off on retail till March 1st. That makes sense because it takes months to get a cultivation facility built out, up and running. So there's no need to have retail licenses, struggling to get up and running when there's no supply chain. Beyond that, when they start issuing retail licenses on March 1st, it takes a retailer time to then go find a properly zoned property, build out their facility, get the permits for that, hire their staff, get it up and operating. So really you're looking at sometime late summer to early fall next year before these retail operations will get up and running. And by then that cultivation supply chain should be falling into place with harvests and product availability. Local governments. In Delaware, local governments may pass ordinances banning any type of cannabis business. While this will be a challenge as you start looking for properties, it's not a concern today. You're not required to have a property as part of your application. So you can go ahead and get your application in. And then what happens is when only 30 people are being awarded these conditional licenses, there's only 30 people out there looking for these properly zoned properties. If they required properties as part of the application process, you'd have potentially hundreds of people searching for these properties, artificially inflating the lease costs, and just making it a headache to find those properties. This is really a good way for a state to do it, where award those 30 licenses. You should not have a problem. You might not get in the town that you'd really like to be, but you might get right next door. So that is the Delaware process as it stands right now. Canna Advisors, how we can help out. We have a full spectrum of service, starting from very early foundational materials such as business plans, financial models, things you need to go raise capital. We certainly will be helping clients with writing the materials required for the application submission, From there, we can help clients with the build out and startup of their facilities. And then from there, we can help you with optimizing facilities and eventually exit strategy. All part of the lifespan of a cannabis business. And we're here for you. So let me go in now and open some Q&A. Any questions? See nothing there. Let me check it. Okay. So if you have questions or if questions pop up, you can email them to bob@thinkcanna.com or info@thinkcanna.com. We will be posting this video on our website. So if you know anybody who's interested in more information, they can go straight to our website. Probably take 2 or 3 days before it's put up there, posted. But then we'll also have a blog where we'll answer any of the questions that roll in as the days go on here. So if there are no questions, I think we'll go ahead and give you back 27 minutes to your valuable business day. I thank everybody for joining and looking forward to working with people there in Delaware. I will be working in and out of Delaware on a regular basis. So hopefully we'll get the chance to meet up in person over the coming days and weeks. Thank you, everybody, for joining.